Congress Vice President Rahul Gandhi is addressing students of the prestigious Narsi Monji Institute of Management Studies in Mumbai. Rahul started off his speech by asking students to know exactly what they want in life and understand the significance of doing whatever they choose to in life. Let's cut back live again to Mumbai.
When we were in government, I remember the current Prime Minister used to ridicule our Prime Minister about prices, about the economy. So my advice to the government of India is get to work. You want to implement the GST, the opposition, which by the way happens to represent 20% of the population of this country. We're not just 40 people in the Lok Sabha, we're 20% of the vote of this country. Set in place the infrastructure to pass the to run the GST. Put a cap. It will be done. So that's the answer to the GST question. You know, I'll tell you something. Where the actual problem lies. When we were in government, our approach was, let's go and talk to the opposition. Let's have a discussion with the opposition and let's come out with a solution. And Arun Jaitley ji, in those days, I don't know if you recall it, he gave an interview in England where he said, it is the strategy of the BJP to block parliament. And they did that for 10 years, non-stop. Right to food, Narega, everything, they blocked wherever they could. It is not the strategy of the Congress party to block Parliament. It will never be the strategy of the Congress party to block Parliament. But we represent people. And we also have a voice among the people we represent. And our leaders and our workers tell us that, listen, our chief ministers in our states tell us that the dispute resolution mechanism has to be fair. It cannot be unfair. That we will not be able to go to our people if suddenly the tax rate skyrockets into the sky. So that is the basic point. Arun Jaitley ji came to see me, to give you an idea. And it was stated in the press. He had a long conversation with me about GST. The reality is Mr. Arun Jaitley came to invite me for his daughter's wedding. That's the reality. And the only conversation about GST that was held was he told me GST is good. And I know GST is good. He doesn't have to tell me GST is good. So the government doesn't believe in a conversation. You know, even the land bill. There was a compromise possible in the land bill. But they were not interested in a conversation. They were like, look, we don't care what the Congress party has to say. There is a compromise possible on the GST. It's sitting on the table. The government is not taking it. Thank you.
Good morning, sir. Sir, do you think politicians should stay away from the administration of cricket bodies or beat any sports bodies in our country, like the recent DDCA scam, and follow the other countries' model? Because as a country, we lag behind in sports.
100%. A short answer, I don't think politicians should be anywhere near the administration of cricket. And I think cricket is something that is loved by the people of India. Cricket is something that people of India love to watch. And I think cricket should be run by cricketers. Cricket should be run with people who have experience in cricket. I don't think politicians should be running cricket. It's a short answer, but that's the answer. What do you think?
Definitely. If you see the model in countries like Australia and England, they are run by professional cricketers or people who have worked in corporate world and not like as in India. And if you see the recent Lodha recommendations on the BCCI scandal also.
Yeah.
So yes, definitely.
So I mean, I'm in agreement with you. I think that's a very good idea.
Sir, you spoke about the stark differences between India and China, and that freedom of thought and freedom of speech was one important difference between the two. With the recent spate of incidents about censorship on the rise, and some would even call it a precursor to intolerance, where do you think India is headed down that road on a morbid road of thought control?
Sorry,
On a morbid road of thought control, where do you think India is headed in the future with censorship on the rise?
I think the ruling dispensation, and particularly the RSS, has a very clear idea of what the world should look like in their mind. There's not much sense of discussion there. They have a vision for India, which everybody is entitled to have. In my opinion, it's a very rigid vision for India. And what experience I have about this country requires flexibility. This country requires openness. It requires movement of ideas to succeed. If you look at the successes we've had, first big success we had was when Gandhiji opened up the political system, allowed millions of people to come into it. A conversation happened. Conversation that said, listen, let's get rid of these British. Right? Out of that conversation came our freedom movement. And you can see that that's the same thing when you look at the telecom revolution. You know, Sam Petroda was an outsider. Sam Petroda came from America and said, you know, look, I have an idea. What do you think? And then that conversation started, we got the telecom revolution. Same with computers, same with liberalization. There is a contradiction, a huge contradiction in saying, I want startups to happen and I will be intolerant. They're connected. Startups require the free movement of ideas. Intolerance curbs the free movement of ideas. If I tell you, sorry, you're a woman and your place is to stay in the kitchen, I'm curbing your creativity, I'm curbing your ideas. I'm taking your ideas and placing them in the kitchen and saying you can't come out of there. So to me, there's a connection between being intolerant and imposing a vision on this country and economic progress and startups. People who run startups, by their very nature, are creative people. You can't tell Steve Jobs that, sorry boss, I don't want you to do that. That's his DNA, that's what he does. So you can't build businesses, build the economy on one hand and say we're going to be intolerant on the other hand. It won't happen. You'll see that you will fail on the economy side. You will fail on the startup side if you're intolerant. And that's the sad part. That's again a big difference between our philosophy and the BJP RSS philosophy. We feel that, look, everybody in India should have an opinion. What's your name with the turban? Pravjit. He's a Sikh, right? For me, he should have access to every single thing that anybody in this room has. And for me, okay, I called him because I can see his turban. And he has a particular religious philosophy. But for me, it ends there. He's an Indian. I do not see anything different in him and in you. And I would not tell him that, listen, you have to live your life in this way. I would consider it arrogant and not my place to tell him that. I want him actually to live his life the way he wants. And it's the same for women. It's the same for Hindus, Muslims. It's the same for lower caste people, upper caste people. That is a difference. Please, sorry, you can sit. That's a difference between us and the BJP. They categorize. There is a Hindu for them, there is a Muslim for them, there is a Sikh for them, there's a woman for them. For me, there's only Indians, nobody else. Everybody is allowed to do what they want. I want that creativity, I want that movement of ideas, because I think that's where our power is. That's how we will do better than China. English Parliament in a dhoti. I say, I don't care. Somebody asked him, sorry, this is not correct dress you brought here. No, this is my formal dress, I'm going inside there. I don't care what you say. That is the Indian spirit. And it has been there for thousands of years.
Good morning, Rahul. First of all, thank you for your ideas. They were truly thought-provoking. A few of them not putting labels, not creating boundaries, truly intriguing. Talking about the education sector, we have some top colleges, IITs, IIMs, but very few of them feature in the top 200 rankings. The latest US survey says that in the top 200 world rankings, India just have 2 colleges. So what do you think? Where are we lagging and what should be done to resolve them?
Let me ask you the question, let me flip it.
Sure.
Who makes the rankings?
So it's the QS survey, they do it annually. There's a private
US survey, right? So let me ask you this. If an Indian survey made those rankings, how many Indian institutions would be in the top 200? Would there be any? Certainly if Indians made those rankings, IITs would be in the top 200. So I'm not too concerned about these rankings. The rankings are made by the Americans, and they have a view on what an education institution should be, and they rank their education institutions. I think our education institutions are not any less than their education institutions. But there is one thing that worries me about our education system. And I'm happy that it is not the case here. At least the alumni told me that it is not the case here. Education is about questioning, it's about challenging. And in many of our schools and colleges, we don't allow our students to challenge and question. That to me is the biggest issue with our education institutions. We are much more into rote learning, much more into remember this, these are the questions, answer these questions, and not into thinking. So I think that's one thing. The second thing is, it's very interesting that our best education institutions were created in the 50s. Creating an education institution, as you would certainly know, is not about replicating an education institution. You can't say here that, okay, now I'm going to create a new college like this and just exactly copy it and make it there. It has a DNA, it has a heart, it has a nervous system, and that grows evolutionarily. We have stopped creating institutions like we used to in the 50s, like we used to in the early 60s. We can replicate an IIT, but we are not creating the IIT of the 21st century. We're just replicating what we already have. And I think that has a lot to do with freeing people to do. And you're doing it. You're not going to get what you want from it. I'll give you a story. Some time back, I am an institution. I'm an intellectual. And when I'm heading a private institution, what are your words? I'm a thief. So you can't trap the person who's running the institution and then expect him to create an IIT. The people who created the first IITs, they were given a blank check. They were said, listen, we want a global institution. Go and do it. Come back when it's done. That's not the approach now. The approach now is, we want an international global institution. Please come and do it. You can't do this, 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 you can't do this. It's not going to happen. And it's connected to the idea of intolerance. You want a global institution, you want an IIT that is powerful, you've got to let free ideas roam inside. When you say inside the IIT that he's a Muslim, he's a Christian, he's a lower caste, she's a woman, this is the way I view the world. You're curbing ideas, you're curbing the flow of ideas. You'll never get an institution. You will get mediocrity. You won't get an institution.
Good morning, Rahul. I have a question for you. So, there have been many terrorist attacks in India in the recent past, say Pathankot for example, and it has caused a huge alarm in the country. So, what according to you should India do? What according to you should India do in order to ensure that its security remains intact?
The main, let me take you back into history a little bit. I think all of you would remember the day the Bombay attacks happened. Do you recall that? What were you doing? Nekbil, what were you doing? No, but when you first heard about it, what were you doing? You're not at home. Okay. Yeah. That well, everybody remembers what they were doing when Bombay happened. I remember I was sitting in my room and suddenly someone called me and said something's gone very wrong in Bombay. You cannot prevent 100% terrorist attacks. You can react to them in the right way. That is completely in your control. He strikes. He has the advantage of surprise. Some strikes you'll protect 90% of, you stop 90% of those strikes, 99%, 1% will get through. He's got through. Now, the main issue is how do you respond? When Bombay happened, the government of India developed a strategy and implemented that strategy. How did the government of India develop the strategy? By going to all the senior people in the government, by going to all the senior people in the political party and asking them, what do you think? The intelligence people, the defense people, talking to everybody. Free flow of ideas. We got a problem, how do we deal with it? And this is something that some of you might know, some of you might not know. But using the Bombay attacks, we completely marginalized Pakistan globally. We went to every single country and we said, look what they have done. And diplomatically, we tied their hands up. So they literally could not move. They're a terrorist nation, they're supporting terrorism. We went to the United States, we went to Europe, and by the end of it, we had taken that attack that they had carried out and made them pay for it. They simply could not dare think about doing that thing again. Not because we were very smart, but because we took the strength of the Indian institutions. We spoke to them and said, what do we do? And they told us that, listen, we need to trap these guys.